Welcome, dear listener, to Whispers of the Night. Welcome to our cozy corner of magic, calm, and mystery. Tonight, we journey together into the serene world of Journey to the City of Whispering Winds, where ethereal streets and gentle whispers await. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell icon to stay connected with our nightly tales of wonder and tranquility. Every story here is crafted to guide you softly into imagination, relaxation, and magic. Take a deep breath, feel the soft currents of wind around you, as if the story itself is guiding your thoughts. Let go of today's worries, settle into your space, and allow your mind to drift gently with the whispers. And now join me as we step quietly into the hidden city where winds speak, hearts awaken, and magic awaits at every corner. Close your eyes and feel your body sink gently into your bed. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale, letting all tension drift away like leaves carried by a gentle breeze. Imagine the soft glow of floating lanterns around you, drifting silently, casting warmth and calm over everything. Feel the cool, soothing winds curling softly around your shoulders, brushing your hair, whispering gently through the air. With every breath, allow your mind to follow the whispers of the wind. They move softly, weaving through crystal streets, around ethereal towers, and through secret gardens, carrying peace and gentle energy to every part of you. The air hums with quiet magic. Each pulse of the wind is like a lullaby for your soul. Any thoughts that linger, any worries that tug at your mind, simply float away on the currents. You are safe. You are calm. You are at home in this serene world. As the whispers circle you, feel them. Fill your mind with gentle images. The heart of the city glowing faintly in the distance. The silver mist curling above the streets, and the chorus of the winds singing softly just for you. Breathe in the calm, breathe out tension, every breath slower, deeper, heavier, and softer. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy as you drift, carried by the magic, the light, and the eternal whispers into a night of deep, restorative sleep. Journey to the City of Whispering Winds. The call of the winds. The winds had always been gentle in Emeli's hometown, a small valley village tucked between rolling hills and endless fields of golden grass. It whispered softly through the open windows at dawn, rustling the curtains like playful visitors, and carried the scent of pine and distant rivers during the warm evenings. But lately, something had changed. The breeze no longer sounded like a simple dance of nature. It had begun to carry something else in intent, a murmur that did not belong to any natural shift of air. Emeli noticed it first during a quiet night when she lay awake in her small attic room, the moon washing pale light across her ceiling. At first, she thought it was simply the wind pushing against the house, or perhaps a stray animal outside. But the sound grew clearer, sharper, and then unmistakably deliberate. Something whispered her name. The first time she heard it, she sat up instantly, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. Emeli. It was faint, almost like someone speaking from a great distance, yet it was distinct enough to make her blood turn cold. She held her breath and listened, waiting for the sound to repeat. But the wind slipped back into its usual rhythm, leaving her unsure if she had imagined the whole thing. She tried to convince herself it was just a trick of exhaustion. Her days had been tiring, filled with the usual routines of tending to the fields, helping her mother in the herbal shed, and running errands around the village. She had barely slept in the last week. Perhaps that was enough to conjure phantom voices. Still, the eerie clarity of the whisper lingered in her mind long after the sound faded. The next night, the wind called again. This time, there was no mistaking it. The whispers curled along the edges of the window like invisible fingers, sliding inside and circling her room. Words she couldn't fully understand layered beneath her name, soft, ancient syllables that felt older than the valley itself. Emeli wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders and stood up, drawn toward the window despite the chill in her spine. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the world outside was black, except for the faint outline of the hills that seemed to ripple in the darkness. The air pulsed as though holding a breath. Then the wind surged, speaking her name again. Louder now, urgent. Emeli, followed by a cluster of unknown words that somehow formed images in her mind, towers of stone that glowed faintly blue, narrow bridges suspended above sweeping canyons, and an intricate symbol carved into a tall archway, a city she had never seen before, but somehow recognized in a way she couldn't explain. Sleep became impossible after that. Every night brought new visions delivered by the whispers. Sometimes they appeared in brief flashes, like broken shards of memories. Other times they unfolded slowly, like someone was painting scenes in her mind, stroke by stroke. The city changed each time, sometimes bright, sometimes shadowed, sometimes alive with movement. One thing remained constant, the sense that it was calling for her, waiting for her, reaching for her through the shifting winds. On the fourth night, she noticed something glowing on her wrist. It appeared suddenly, a faint shimmer beneath her skin that pulsed softly with a pale blue light. Emeli stared at it, confused and frightened. It resembled an intricate mark, a symbol shaped like two twisting paths meeting in a spiral. When she touched it, warmth spread through her fingers, and the wind outside rushed harder against the windows, as if responding to her. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. She pulled her hand back quickly, but the glow only brightened. Her thoughts raced. Was she falling ill? Was this some kind of fever dream? But the light was real. She could see it clearly. She could feel its warmth. It was as if something had been awakened inside her without her permission, something ancient and long forgotten. During the day, she hid the mark beneath a cloth band. She didn't dare show it to anyone, not even her mother, who would immediately worry or summon the village healer. And how would she explain it? That the wind itself seemed to be speaking to her, tugging at her thoughts. She barely understood it herself. But even during the daylight hours, when the village bustled with people carrying baskets of grain or tending to wandering goats, Emeli sensed the wind watching her. It followed her through the fields, brushing against her ears with faint murmurs. It circled her ankles when she walked along the stone paths. It swept through her hair as if urging her to listen, to follow, to understand. She tried ignoring it. She threw herself into work, helping mend tools, grinding herbs, assisting travelers who passed through the valley. But no amount of distraction could erase the feeling that something was shifting around her. The visions only intensified. One afternoon, as she walked alone along the hillside to gather wild sage, a sudden gust stole her breath and the world spun. For a moment, she wasn't in the valley at all. She stood in the middle of the stone city she had glimpsed so many nights before. The sky above it churned with swirling streams of wind, weaving luminous patterns like a tapestry of moving air. Towers rose high around her, carved with symbols matching the mark on her wrist. The ground beneath her feet hummed with a deep, steady vibration, as though the entire city was alive. A voice echoed across the stone platforms, not a whisper this time, but a clear, resonant call. It spoke her name with certainty, as if it had known her all her life. She spun around, searching for the source, but the vision began to fade. The air thinned, the structures dissolved like mist, and the familiar hillside returned in a rush of light and dizziness. Emeli fell to her knees, gasping. She looked down at her wrist and saw the mark glowing brighter than before, pulsing rapidly like a heartbeat. That was the moment she realized she couldn't dismiss any of it anymore. Something was calling her, something real, powerful, and beyond anything she had been taught or ever believed. And it wanted her to come to this ancient place that existed somewhere beyond the edge of all maps she had seen. The city in her visions felt impossibly far, yet strangely close, like a memory she had forgotten but was now being forced to remember. That night, the wind was relentless. It battered the sides of the house, howled through the cracks in the door, and wrapped around her room like a living presence. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling in her lap as the whispers swirled clearly around her. "Come," they urged. "Come to us. Follow the winds. The path opens. The city waits." Emeli, she covered her ears, shaking her head. But the whispers were inside her now, vibrating through her bones. The images came again this time, stronger. She saw a stone gate covered in carvings, a narrow road stretching across a barren land, and a towering structure shaped like a giant spire rising into the sky. She watched as glowing lights spiraled around the city, following invisible currents, and then she saw something else, a figure, standing at the city's edge, cloaked in silver, their face hidden, holding out a hand toward her dot. When the vision collapsed, she was left breathless, her heart pounding. The wind died suddenly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Emeli's room felt unbearably small, suffocating her. She stood up, pacing as thoughts tumbled in chaotic waves through her mind. Why her? What was this glowing mark? Who was the cloaked figure? Was the city real, or was she being pulled towards something dangerous and possibly deadly? Yet, despite the fear clawing at her chest, one thing was undeniable. The whispering winds were calling her for a reason. And if she stayed here, she would never understand what that reason was. She stepped toward the window and pushed it open. A soft breeze drifted in, gentle once more, almost reassuring. It brushed her cheek as if it sensed her hesitation. She stared into the dark valley below, feeling a tug deep within her soul. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, responding to the wind like two old friends speaking in a forgotten language. Emeli closed the window slowly. In that moment, she made her decision. She would leave the valley. She would follow the whispers, even if the path led her into danger or the unknown. Remaining here while something so powerful reached for her felt impossible now. A pull stronger than fear settled in her chest, a certainty she had never felt before. She spent the rest of the night gathering what few things she owned: a small pack with dried fruit, bread, a water flask, her mother's old compass, and a knife her father had once used for carving wood. She hesitated only once when she looked at her mother's bedroom door. She wanted to wake her, to explain, but she knew her mother would never let her go. Worse, she might think Emeli had gone mad, and how could Emeli blame her? None of this sounded rational, but the wind seemed to pulse through the walls, now urging her onward, whispering reassurance that she was doing what she must. Before the sun rose, she slipped quietly out of the house. The world outside was still dark, painted in shades of deep blue. The grass was wet with dew, and the distant hills were barely visible. Emeli stood for a moment at the edge of the path, breathing in the cool morning air. The wind curled around her gently, like a promise. The mark on her wrist warmed under the surface of her skin. She walked away from her home without looking back. The whispers guided her steps, steady and strangely comforting now. It was as if the winds themselves were accompanying her, carrying her forward toward the journey that had been calling her long before she realized it. Emeli didn't know where the path would take her. She didn't know what awaited in the city of whispering winds, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her life in the quiet valley had ended the moment the wind spoke her name. The world was larger, stranger, and far more ancient than she had ever imagined, and now she was bound to discover the role the winds had chosen for her. And with her first steps into the unknown, her destiny truly began. The path through the forgotten forest. The forest marked the true beginning of Emeli's journey, though she had left her village behind hours earlier. Walking across the rolling fields under a pale morning sky, it wasn't until she reached the looming tree line that she felt the weight of her decision settle firmly on her shoulders. The forgotten forest rose before her like a wall of ancient shadows, its towering trunks twisted upward into a canopy so thick that barely a sliver of sunlight could seep through. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with an old magic she had only heard about in stories told around crackling fires. Villagers spoke of this forest with a mix of caution and reverence, warning travelers never to stray from the narrow, hidden paths. It was said the forest could confuse even the most experienced wanderers, turning familiar trails into endless loops. Some claimed it created illusions, playing tricks on the mind until one no longer knew what was real. Emeli paused at the edge, gripping the strap of her pack tightly. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The winds that had accompanied her across The open plains now grew faint, almost hesitant. Only the mark on her wrist continued its steady glow, pulsing gently beneath her skin as if nudging her forward. "I know," she whispered to the wind, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to herself or to whatever force guided her. "I'll keep going." With a deep breath, she stepped between the ancient trees. Instantly, the world changed. The scent of damp earth and moss washed over her, thick and rich. The temperature dropped several degrees, and the sunlight vanished behind the dense canopy, replaced by a dim, greenish glow that filtered down in thin strands. The forest floor was soft beneath her boots, cushioned by layers of fallen leaves and weaving roots. Strange, faint sounds echoed around her, a distant hum, the soft flutter of wings, the rustling of unseen creatures slipping through the undergrowth. Emeli walked carefully, alert, her ears straining to pick up anything that felt out of place. She had heard more than once that the forgotten forest had a habit of turning newcomers around, making them walk in circles until exhaustion pulled them under. But she wasn't entirely alone. The glowing mark guided her, warming whenever she stepped in the right direction, cooling faintly when she wandered off the invisible path meant for her. For a while, the forest seemed quiet enough, almost peaceful despite its eerie reputation. But as Emeli ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted. The trees closed in, their thick branches curling like arms overhead. The silence deepened until even her footsteps felt too loud. Then came the whispers, not like the winds she had followed. From home, but softer, playful, like giggles carried on breath. Emeli froze, turning slowly. She sensed movement, but each time she looked, nothing seemed there. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. Something was watching her. A faint glow darted past her vision. She gasped, stepping back. Another small flicker of light swooped near her shoulder, leaving a faint trail of sparkling dust before vanishing behind a tree. Then 2 more appeared, swirling around her in tiny loops. Emeli narrowed her eyes, trying to follow them. They moved too quickly, leaving only glimmers of soft white-blue light. She lowered her hand cautiously. Wind spirits. She had heard of them, creatures said to be born from the first storms that roamed the world, mischievous but harmless unless provoked. They rarely ventured near villages, favoring ancient forests and forgotten places where magic pooled naturally. To see even one was rare. To see several at once was almost unheard of. One zipped close enough for her to see its form clearly. For a brief moment, a tiny, translucent shape, no bigger than her palm, with delicate wings that fluttered like shimmering leaves caught in the breeze. Its eyes glowed bright with mischief, and when it circled her head, a faint chiming sound echoed, light and playful. "Hello," Emeli whispered, unsure if the spirits understood language at all. The spirits didn't respond with words. Instead, they darted away abruptly, leaving a streak of light as they moved. They hovered in front of her, then zipped to the left, pausing as if waiting for her to follow. When she didn't move, they swooped back toward her, tugging gently at the ends of her hair before rushing again in the same direction. Emeli frowned softly. "You want me to go that way?" she murmured. The spirits chimed in agreement, bright as they were. Something about their behavior made her uneasy. Their movements were too eager, too insistent. She glanced down at her wrist. The glowing mark flickered once, then dimmed slightly. A warning. Her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered to the spirits. Not that way. Her wrist warmed again, guiding her to continue straight ahead. As soon as she took a step away from the direction the spirits had pointed her to, their laughter shifted. A deeper, echoing hum vibrated through the air. The spirits swirled around her more quickly, their lights turning a faint shade of gray-blue. They zipped across her path repeatedly, trying to block her way. Emeli raised her hand defensively. "I'm sorry," she said, backing up slowly, "but I can't follow you." A gust of wind burst suddenly through the trees, natural, sharp, and cold. It blew the spirits apart into scattered sparks that quickly reformed and circled again, this time more frantically. The forest seemed to twist around her. For a moment, she thought the trees had shifted positions, their trunks turning at impossible angles. Her heart raced, bought illusions. The spirits weren't trying to help her. They were leading her astray, guiding her deeper into the maze of the forest's tricks. The stories had warned her of this. The forest loved to confuse travelers, and the wind spirits, playful and fickle, were known to enjoy leading wanderers into endless loops. The glow on her wrist flared brighter, steadying the world around her. The twisting trees straightened, the shadows softened, and the spirits' lights dispersed briefly, as if pushed back by an unseen force. Emeli exhaled shakily. "Thank you," she murmured to the glowing mark. With renewed determination, she pressed forward, ignoring the disgruntled chimes of the spirits. They followed her for a while longer, appearing and disappearing among the branches. But eventually, their presence faded, swallowed by the forest's vastness. Hours passed. The forest seemed endless. Her legs ached, and fatigue seeped into her bones. She tried to keep track of time, but the dim light beneath the canopy made it impossible to tell how long she had been walking. The mark on her wrist, though still glowing, pulsed more slowly now, as if conserving its energy. She took a short rest, drinking from her flask and leaning against a tree older than any building she had ever seen. When she began walking again, she noticed something strange. The trees ahead thinned slightly, and a faint plume of smoke curled upward into the air, not thick or dangerous, but thin and deliberate, like someone tending a small fire. Emeli hesitated. Few people traveled through this forest, fewer still lingered long enough to build fires. She gripped her pack straps and quietly approached, stepping over roots with care as she neared. She saw a worn clearing surrounded by moss-covered stones. At the center sat an old man by a small campfire. His cloak was patched and frayed, his boots covered in mud, and his long white hair fell loosely over his shoulders. Despite his weary appearance, his eyes were sharp and bright with awareness. They flicked toward her before she could say a word. "You've been followed," he said simply, poking at the fire with a crooked branch. Emeli froze. "By what?" "The forest," he replied. "It watches newcomers closely. Sometimes spirits, sometimes shadows, sometimes the forest itself." His gaze drifted briefly to her wrist, where the cloth covering her mark had shifted slightly, letting a faint glow seep through. His eyebrows lifted. "Ah, and sometimes other things watch as well." Self-conscious, Emeli tugged the cloth back into place. "I'm just passing through." "No one just passes through the forgotten forest," the old wanderer said, shifting to pour water from a battered canteen onto a pile of herbs beside him. "They come because they are lost, or because something calls them." The last words hung heavily in the air. Emeli swallowed hard. The man studied her carefully. "You are being called, aren't you?" She hesitated before answering. "Think so. Then you walk a dangerous road." He leaned back, a shadow crossing his features. "I've seen the winds lead people before. Some follow willingly, others fight against it. But all who hear the call are forever changed." Emeli sat slowly across from him. The fire crackled softly between them. "Do you know anything about the city? The one the winds speak of?" His eyes hardened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a low voice, he replied, "The city of whispering winds." Emeli's breath caught. This was the first time anyone besides herself had spoken its name. Aloud. "You've heard of it?" she asked. The old wanderer nodded. "I have been near it once, long ago." He paused, staring into the fire as if seeing something far beyond the flames. "It is a place of truth, a place where the winds carry memories, secrets, and power older than the mountains themselves. The city grants truth, but also takes it." A chill ran through Emeli. "Takes it?" "Yes." His voice was grave. "Those who enter seeking answers often find them, but the price is never small. The city doesn't simply reveal what you want to know, it reveals what you need to know. And sometimes the truth it gives will cost you something precious." Emeli felt her pulse quicken. "Why are the winds calling me?" "That," he said softly, "only the city can answer. But be warned, girl, once you walk through its gates, you do not leave unchanged." Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant rustle of leaves. Emeli stared into the flames, her determination strengthening even as uncertainty gnawed at her. She had already left everything behind. She couldn't turn back now. After a while, the wanderer stood, gathering his things. "If you're going," he said, "stick to the path your light shows you. Not the voices, not the illusions. Your mark knows the way better than any map." He gave her a small nod, then added, under his breath, "May the winds be kind to you, Emeli." Before she could ask his name or thank him, he disappeared into the trees as quietly as smoke fading in the night. Left alone, Emeli stared at her glowing wrist. The mark pulsed, steadily warm, determined, alive. She rose, adjusted her pack, and stepped once more into the depths of the forest. The shadows parted before her, guided by the faint but unwavering glow that led her onward. And though the forest still whispered and the spirits still stirred, Emeli felt a growing certainty inside her. Whatever truth awaited her in the distant city of whispering winds, she would face it. Her path had already begun. "That," he said softly, "only the city can answer. But be warned, girl, once you walk through its gates, you do not leave unchanged." Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant rustle of leaves. Emeli stared into the flames, her determination strengthening even as uncertainty gnawed at her. She had already left everything behind. She couldn't turn back now. After a while, the wanderer stood, gathering his things. "If you're going," he said, "stick to the path your light shows you, not the voices, not the illusions. Your mark knows the way better than any map." He gave her a small nod, then added under his breath, "May the winds be kind to you, Emeli." Before she could ask his name or thank him, he disappeared into the trees as quietly as smoke fading in the night. Left alone, Emeli stared at her glowing wrist. The mark pulsed steadily warm, determined, alive. She rose, adjusted her pack, and stepped once more into the depths of the forest. The shadows parted before her, guided by the faint but unwavering glow that led her onward. And though the forest still whispered and the spirits still stirred, Emeli felt a growing certainty inside her. Whatever truth awaited her in the distant city of whispering winds, she would face it. Her path had already begun. Echoes in the Crystal Valley. Emeli emerged from the edges of the forgotten forest into a landscape so startling that she had to pause to catch her breath. The trees fell away abruptly, revealing a vast valley unlike anything she had ever seen. The ground stretched wide, covered in soft moss, interspersed with small, luminescent flowers that swayed gently in a wind she could not feel, yet somehow sensed. Rising on either side were cliffs that glimmered as if carved from giant crystals, jagged and towering, catching the faint light of the sun in fractured reflections. Every color she could imagine shimmered in the cliffs. Pale blues, faint purples, soft greens, and occasional streaks of gold. It was beautiful, alien, and hauntingly quiet. Even the usual sounds of nature seemed muffled here, as though the valley itself held its breath. She stepped carefully forward, feeling the soft moss beneath her boots. The wind from the forest had followed her, brushing gently against her cheeks, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and something mineral like the tang of stones freshly broken from the earth. The valley seemed alive, yet unlike the forest, its presence was calm, almost reverent. Emeli's wrist glowed faintly, pulsing with steady rhythm, guiding her steps toward the center of the valley. It wasn't long before she noticed something extraordinary. A sharp note rang out a single high-pitched chime, though she hadn't seen anyone strike anything. She stopped, her heart hammering. Another note followed, then a third. They were faint, delicate, like bells, but they carried weight, resonance. The sound seemed to originate from the cliffs themselves. Emeli took a tentative step closer to one of the crystalline faces. She held her hand up, letting her fingers hover just above the surface. The moment she did, a subtle vibration ran through her palm, and the crystal responded. A wave of light shimmered across the face, faintly revealing a scene, a memory, not her own at first, but vaguely familiar. The cliff's surface was like a mirror of time. The wind whispered past her ears, carrying sound that should have been lost forever. The notes repeated in patterns, as though the valley itself was replaying history. Trees bent in storms long past, rivers sparkled in the sunlight of forgotten days. Voices echoed faintly, calling names she did not recognize. And yet, even in these foreign echoes, there was a feeling of recognition, as though the valley remembered. Events older than she could imagine, but which somehow still touched her directly. She moved further into the valley, and as she walked, every step seemed to awaken the cliffs around her. A breeze rushed through the passage between the crystalline towers, and the sound of the wind made the stones sing. Each note triggered images in the reflective surfaces, like the crystals themselves were recalling events from the past. One moment, a small child ran through a village she didn't know. The next, these visions were fleeting, dissolving before she could study them in detail. Yet Emeli felt an unfamiliar pull, a sensation that tugged at the edges of her memory. Then it happened, a sound, unlike any other, soft but unmistakable, a familiar laugh, gentle and warm, carried on the crystal breeze. Emeli froze. The sound made her chest ache with longing and recognition. She followed the resonance through the valley, tracing it along a narrow path of glittering stone. And then she saw it. The crystal shimmered, reflecting a memory from her childhood, one she had buried deep under layers of time and forgetfulness. She was small, perhaps no older than 5 or 6, running across the grassy courtyard of her family's home. Sunlight warmed her face, and laughter bubbled from her lips. But in the memory, someone else was their tall figure whose face she could not see, but whose presence made the air around her hum. They knelt down, reaching toward her with a hand that glowed faintly, touching her forehead and whispering words she had long forgotten. Remember, Emeli, one day the wind will call you, and you will know the path. The city awaits. Emeli staggered backward, her fingers brushing the glowing mark on her wrist. The warmth there now spread through her arm, a pulsing rhythm that matched the echo of the memory. Her breath caught the whispers, the winds, the voices she had followed were not strangers. They were tied to her past, to her very self. For a long moment, the world felt as though it had narrowed to the pulsing glow of the mark and the lingering echo of that forgotten memory. Her knees weakened, and she sank to the soft moss beneath her, staring up at the crystalline cliffs. The wind, carrying faint murmurs, swirled gently through the valley. This time, the whispers were clear, intimate. Emeli, Emeli, they called, not with urgency, but with familiarity. The valley itself seemed to recognize her. It had been waiting. It had always been waiting. Questions tumbled over each other in her mind. Why had she forgotten this memory? Why had no one mentioned the words of that mysterious figure? And most importantly, what did it mean that the winds knew her past? Her pulse quickened as she realized she had been chosen for something much greater than a simple journey or curiosity. The city of whispering winds had called her because she belonged to it, because the threads of her life were interwoven with the ancient place in ways she had yet to understand. The valley continued to unfold its secrets. Emeli rose and moved cautiously along the path, testing the vibrations in the crystal cliffs with her hands as she walked. Every surface she touched seemed to respond, echoing fragments of sound that were like whispers from another time. Sometimes it was the soft laughter of a child, sometimes the somber tones of voices in mourning, sometimes the quiet words of guidance, repeated endlessly through the centuries. With each step, Emeli felt herself learning, absorbing, connecting to the long-forgotten histories around her. The wind carried hints of movement far above, and she glanced up. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the cliffs, catching the edges of the crystals and sending beams across the valley floor. The reflections danced in intricate patterns, almost like symbols she didn't yet comprehend. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the light, her wrist's mark glowing brighter with each echo she passed. She realized that the valley was teaching her, showing her not only glimpses of her own past, but also the essence of the city she sought. The winds and the crystals worked in tandem, one carrying memory, the other preserving it in crystalline forms so that all who entered would be shown both truth and the path forward. Hours passed as she explored, the valley stretching endlessly in every direction. At one point, she paused to rest beside a particularly tall crystal formation, its surface smooth and radiant. When she placed her hand against it, she heard her own voice, her laughter from when she had been a child, the same memory she had glimpsed before. And then, unexpectedly, she heard the voice of her mother, faint but unmistakable, calling her name across the crystalline expanse. Emeli's eyes filled with tears. The valley was not just showing her what she had forgotten, it was reminding her of who she was, of the life she had left behind, and the connections that tied her to this world. For the first time, she understood fully the weight of the journey ahead. The city of whispering winds was not a place she could reach blindly. It demanded understanding, reflection, and a willingness to confront her own past. Every memory, every echo in the crystals was part of the lesson the winds had been sending her from the very beginning, and the mark on her wrist, her guide, her tether, was far more than a mere symbol. It was a connection to everything the city represented, a living key that would open doors to truths that might otherwise remain hidden forever. Emeli's resolve hardened. She could no longer see herself as merely following a calling from the wind. She was part of something far larger, part of a story that had begun long before her birth, and whose threads were now woven into her own life. The whispers were not strangers, they were familiar, intimate, and patient. They knew her, and they had waited for the moment she was ready to recognize them. As twilight approached, the valley's colors shifted. The crystals took on deeper shades of purple and sapphire, reflecting the fading light in jagged patterns across the soft moss. The wind carried an increasing hum, stronger now, guiding her toward a narrow pass that led out of the main valley. Emeli followed, her steps confident, trusting the gentle tug of the glowing mark on her wrist. Before leaving, she paused one last time, placing both hands against a cluster of crystals. The echoes came again, soft and haunting. She heard fragments of voices, distant laughter, the faint murmur of instructions she had not yet learned. She realized, with a mixture of awe and humility, that the valley was more than a mere place. It was a living archive, a repository of memory and guidance. Every sound, every shimmer of light was a reminder that she was not alone, that the winds and the city had always been part of her story. With a final deep breath, she let the valley's echoes settle behind her and stepped toward the narrow path that would lead her to the next stage of her journey. The wind rose once more, brushing against her cheeks with purpose and strength. It carried with it the faint, playful laughter of the wind spirits from the forest, the resonant hum of the crystal valley, and, beneath it all, a whisper that made her heart leap. "We know you, Emeli. We have always known you." Storm at the edge of the world. The valley behind her gradually receded as Emeli pressed forward, guided by the steady pulse of the glowing mark on her wrist. The path she followed began to climb, winding upward along jagged cliffs that overlooked a vast expanse of clouds swirling in the distance. She could sense the city of whispering winds somewhere beyond those clouds, its presence tugging at the very air around her. The wind itself had changed since she left the valley, no longer soft or playful. It carried a charged intensity, crackling with energy that hinted at storms gathering far ahead by mid-afternoon. She reached the edge of the highlands. Here, the landscape fell away sharply into nothingness, revealing a chasm so deep that the bottom was hidden behind a veil of rolling mist. A single stone bridge spanned the gap, ancient and narrow, suspended precariously between cliffs carved with jagged ridges. Moss and lichen covered the stones, slick with the fine mist that rose from the chasm below. The bridge trembled faintly with the wind, each gust sending tiny pebbles skittering across its surface. Emeli's stomach tightened at the sight, but she took a deep breath, steadying herself. There was no other way forward. The bridge was the only path to the city. The first hints of the storm appeared just as she began to step onto the bridge. Dark clouds had gathered quickly above her, rolling and swirling in unnatural patterns. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and menacing, while occasional streaks of lightning illuminated the chasm with startling brilliance. The wind grew stronger with each step, whipping her hair across her face and threatening to unbalance her on the trembling stones. She gripped the strap of her pack tightly, every muscle in her body taut with tension. As she advanced, the storm intensified. A sudden gust hit her side, nearly toppling her, and she fell to her knees, clutching the rough stone beneath her hands. The bridge shuddered violently, as if it too feared the storm. Emeli could hear the wind's roar now, deafening, almost alive, carrying whispers distorted into urgent cries. She realized, with a pang of fear, that the storm wasn't merely a natural occurrence. It seemed aware of her, resisting her progress, testing her resolve. The glowing mark on her wrist flared fiercely, burning against her skin like a living flame. In a moment of instinctive clarity, she lifted her hand toward the wind, feeling the energy around her respond to her heartbeat. And then, without thinking, she spoke softly at first, almost a whisper, but clear. "Please calm the gusts." Faltered for a fraction of a second. The bridge stilled. Emeli's eyes widened. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that the winds, these elemental forces that had tested her for so long, could hear her. Her heart pounded in excitement and fear. She took a shaky breath and tried again, this time raising her voice, letting it carry over the roar of the storm. A song rose from her lips, hesitant at first, a melody she had never consciously learned but somehow knew by instinct. It was soft and fluid, like a ripple through the air, and as she sang, the wind responded. The gusts slowed, the crackle of lightning softened, and the bridge beneath her feet trembled less violently. Each note she sang seemed to push the storm back, parting the clouds just enough to create a narrow corridor of calm. Emeli's voice strengthened with confidence. The song poured out of her as naturally as breathing, carrying warmth and clarity into the chaos around her. She realized, with astonishment, that she was not simply commanding the winds, she was harmonizing with them, channeling their energy through her voice. Each note resonated with the pulse of the storm, echoing in her chest and in the stones of the bridge. Lightning flashed dangerously close, illuminating the sheer drop on either side, but the calm corridor around her expanded slightly, with each measure of her song. She could see the far end of the bridge, shadowed beneath the storm clouds, and she knew she had to reach it before the storm reclaimed its fury. Step by step, she moved forward, her song unwavering, even as her arms ached and her legs trembled. The storm intensified briefly in response, as if testing her resolve, and Emeli faltered. The wind whipped around her, nearly throwing her to the stones. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her rather than forcing it from herself. The mark on her wrist pulsed in time with her heartbeat, warm and steady. She trusted it completely, and with that trust, her voice carried further than ever. The storm yielded, bending around her path like water flowing around a stone. Halfway across the bridge, a tremendous bolt of lightning struck a nearby spire of stone, sending sparks and shards cascading down into the misty chasm. The sound was deafening, and Emeli dropped to her hands and knees instinctively. She trembled, her voice faltering for a moment, but then she remembered the memory from the Crystal Valley, the guidance of the city, and the whispers that had always known her. She lifted her head and let herself feel the storm rather than resist it. The melody emerged again, stronger, more deliberate. The wind shifted at last, curling around her in protective arcs. The lightning danced above, spectacular and dangerous, but no longer threatened her immediate path. The bridge beneath her no longer quivered with fear, and she could feel the stones responding to the harmony of her song. Step by step, note by note, she moved forward. As she neared the far end of the bridge, the storm finally relented. The wind softened into a gentle, persistent breeze, carrying with it the scent of rain and the faint, metallic temps of distant clouds. Emeli's song tapered naturally into a soft hum, her breath ragged but triumphant. She looked down at her wrist. The mark pulsed steadily, glowing in rhythm with the residual wind currents. It was alive, vibrant, and attuned to her in a way she could finally comprehend. For the first time, she understood the gift she had awakened. The winds had always been more than a guide. They were an extension of herself, the city of whispering. Winds had called her not just to follow, but to participate, to merge with the elemental forces surrounding her, to shape them with her will and her voice. This knowledge filled her with awe, mingled with exhaustion, as she stepped safely off the trembling stone bridge and onto the solid ground beyond. The landscape ahead began to shift subtly. Clouds parted just enough to reveal glimpses of soaring spires in the distance, shapes that matched the visions she had seen in the Crystal Valley. The air carried a soft hum, gentle now, like a distant chorus welcoming her forward. Emeli paused, closing her eyes, feeling the energy of the storm lingering in the atmosphere, the wind brushing softly against her cheeks. She sang once more, a short, quiet melody of gratitude and affirmation, and the currents of air seemed to wrap around her like a protective cloak. Her heart swelled with the realization that she had crossed more than a mere bridge. She had confronted fear itself, harmonized with the elements, and discovered a hidden power that she would need for the journey ahead. The storm had been a test, but more than that, it had been a revelation. She was not simply a traveler following a mysterious call. She was becoming part of the living forces that defined the city itself. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, painting streaks of amber and rose across the distant clouds, Emeli looked back at the stone bridge. The storm had left only a faint trail of mist swirling above the chasm, a reminder of its fury and her triumph. Then she turned her gaze forward, toward the city of whispering winds rising faintly above the distant cliffs. Its spires glimmered like the crystalline valley she had passed through, carried by currents of air that seemed almost tangible. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, and her throat was hoarse, but she felt a clarity she had never known before. The winds whispered around her now, soft and encouraging, guiding her steps as she continued along the narrow mountain paths that led toward the city. She felt the mark on her wrist pulse with renewed strength, a constant reminder of her connection to the journey, to the elements, and to the city that awaited her. Emeli walked into the growing twilight with unwavering resolve. The storm had not defeated her, it had awakened her, and as she stepped forward, she could feel that each note of her voice, each beat of her heart, was in tune with the path before her. The winds carried her forward, their whispers now familiar and comforting, promising that the city of whispering winds was no longer a distant mystery, waiting to reveal its truths, its power, and her destiny. With the first stars beginning to shimmer in the darkening sky, she took a deep breath and whispered to the winds one last time before night fully claimed the world. "I am ready." And the air responded, soft and resonant, as if acknowledging her words, welcoming her toward the city at the edge of the world. The gates that speak. The road narrowed as Emeli approached the end of the valley, its pale stones worn smooth by centuries of unseen footsteps. The city of whispering winds rose before her at last, no longer a distant vision stitched together by rumor and dreams, but a vast presence pressing gently against the sky. Its towers shimmered like brushed silver, catching light that did not seem to come from the sun alone. The air here felt different, thicker, warmer, alive with a subtle hum that vibrated beneath her skin. Each step forward made her heart beat louder, as if it were trying to speak before her mouth could. The gates stood at the city's edge, impossibly tall and curved inward like two great wings folded in rest. They were forged from silver-toned metal, etched with flowing symbols that shifted when she tried to focus on them. The surface reflected not her image, but fragments of the road she had walked, dusty paths, moonlit fields, the trembling river where she had once stopped to listen to the wind whisper her name. Emeli stopped several paces away, her breath catching. She had imagined gates like these since the whispers first called her, but standing before them now, she felt small in a way that was not unkind, as if the world were asking her to be honest about her place within it. As she drew closer, the wind softened, circling her ankles, then her wrists, like a cautious greeting. The glowing mark on her wrist warmed, pulsing in quiet recognition. When her fingers brushed the cold metal, the gates exhaled, and sound spilled. Into the air, not words at first, but murmurs layered upon murmurs, like many voices speaking at once from a great distance. They wrapped around her, slipping into her ears, her thoughts, her chest. "Emeli," they whispered, her name carried with the familiarity of someone who had known her a long time. "You have come far. The sound did not frighten her, yet it unsettled something deep inside. She nodded without realizing it, unsure whether the gates could see her. The voices shifted, growing clearer, separating into distinct tones that echoed moments from her life. She heard her mother's gentle voice calling her in from the fields at dusk. She heard laughter from friends she had not spoken to in years. She heard her own voice, younger, trembling with excitement, as she once spoke of dreams she never followed. Her chest tightened. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. The gates responded not with an answer, but with a question that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What do you seek within the city?" Emeli opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had rehearsed answers during her journey knowledge, understanding the truth behind the whispers, but now they felt incomplete. She searched herself for something more honest. "I seek to understand why I was called," she said finally, "and what I'm meant to do." The wind paused, as if considering her words. Then the whispers deepened, carrying a different weight. Images formed in her mind without warning, moments she had tried to forget, feelings she had buried beneath politeness and patience. She saw herself standing at the edge of choices she never made, watching others move forward while she remained. Still, she felt the familiar ache of doubt she carried like a quiet companion. "You speak of purpose," the gates murmured, "yet you walk with fear." Emeli swallowed. "Everyone has fear." "Yes," the voices agreed softly, "but not all hide from it." The metal beneath her hand grew warmer, and the air shifted again. This time, the memories sharpened. She saw a night from years ago when she had been offered a chance to leave her hometown, to study, to explore the world beyond the familiar hills. She had smiled, thanked the messenger, and declined, telling herself she was content. She remembered the relief that followed, and beneath it, the sorrow she never admitted. Her heart began to pound. She had not expected this. "That was a long time ago," she said, more to herself than to the gates. "Time does not silence what is unspoken," the whispers replied. "It only teaches it to wait." Emeli stepped back, her hand slipping from the gate. The wind followed her, brushing her hair across her face. She felt exposed, as though the city itself could see through her, past the careful image she presented to the world. The fear she had hidden for years stirred fully awake, the fear of leaving, of failing, of discovering that her dreams might be too fragile or too demanding to survive reality. "I was afraid," she admitted quietly. Saying it aloud felt heavier than she expected. "Afraid that if I tried and failed, I'd lose even what little certainty I had." The gates did not move. The whispers continued, gentler now, yet unyielding. "And are you still afraid?" Emeli closed her eyes. The answer rose before she could shape it. She thought of the road she had walked alone, of the nights when the whispers guided her instead of comforted her. She thought of the mark on her wrist, glowing steadily, refusing to fade. "Yes," she said, "I am." The wind sighed, warm against her skin. "Then speak the fear you carry deepest." Her breath trembled. She had named her fear many times in her thoughts, but always in pieces, never whole. Now the gates waited, patient as stone. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I'm afraid that if I step fully into what calls me, I won't belong anywhere anymore," she said. "That I'll become someone unfamiliar, even to myself. That I'll disappoint the people who know me as I am now." The words fell into the air and lingered. For a long moment, there was only the soft sound of wind flowing through the valley. Emeli felt lighter and more vulnerable at once, as though she had set down a burden she had carried so long she forgot it was optional. The whispers returned, weaving together into a single, resonant voice. Belonging is not the same as remaining unchanged, it said. Growth reshapes, but it does not erase. The gates began to glow, faint lines of light tracing the symbols carved into their surface. Emeli watched in awe as the light spread like veins of gold beneath silver skin. The air warmed further, carrying a scent like rain on stone and something older she could not name. "Do you accept the truth you have spoken?" the gates asked. Emeli hesitated only a second. Accepting it meant no longer pretending she was content with half-lived dreams. It meant responsibility, not just to the city, but to herself. She straightened, lifting her chin. "I do," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The wind surged gently, wrapping around her in a current that felt almost like an embrace. The gates responded with a deep, resonant sound, not quite a creak, not quite a sigh. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, they began to part. Light spilled through the opening, warm and golden, carrying echoes of distant chimes and flowing air. As the gap widened, Emeli felt something within her shift. The fear did not vanish, but it loosened its grip. No longer a wall, but a shadow she could walk beside. She realized that the gates had not demanded courage in the absence of fear, but honesty in its presence. Before she stepped forward, the whispers spoke once more, softer now, almost kind. "Remember this moment," they said. "The city opens to those who listen without turning away." Emeli took a breath and crossed the threshold. The warm, ancient wind flowed past her, lifting her hair and carrying away the last echoes of doubt that clung too tightly. Behind her, the gates remained, open, glowing quietly, as if acknowledging that she had not arrived as someone fearless, but as someone true. The heart of whispering winds. Inside the city, Emeli found herself surrounded by ethereal streets, floating lights, and ancient structures that seemed to hum with the very essence of wind magic. Every building shimmered faintly, translucent, stone revealing glimpses of the memories embedded within. Echoes of centuries of whispered conversations between the winds and those who had walked these streets before her. The glow of the floating lanterns reflected softly on the walls, creating trails of golden light that swirled gently around her like spirits dancing in quiet celebration. The city itself breathed around her, exhaling soft spirals of silver mist that rose into the sky and dissolved into sparkling glitter. Each step Emeli took sent ripples of pale blue light pulsing beneath her feet, as though the stones themselves recognized her presence. She had always wondered why the winds called to her, why she felt inexplicably tethered to invisible threads that no one else seemed to notice. Now she understood. She had been guided here, to this place. All her life, above her, the floating lanterns drifted like quiet stars, their motion not guided by ropes or machinery, but by the ancient currents of air that seemed alive, aware, responsive. The lanterns cast warm golden halos over murals etched into the walls' depictions of past wind listeners. Their names long forgotten, their stories curling around the stone in elegant spirals. Emeli felt their presence in the faintest whispers and glimmers of light, like the gentle touch of hands she had never held, voices of encouragement that stirred her heart. The whispering grew louder as she ventured further. It was no longer a scattered, mysterious murmur. Now it was unified, steady, deliberate, like a single ancient mind, speaking through thousands of delicate currents. "You have come far, Emeli." The words brushed against her ears, wrapping around her like a warm breeze. Her wrist pulsed, the glowing mark intensifying with every heartbeat, each flicker of light synchronized with the rhythm of the city itself. She halted, feeling the magic that surrounded her more tangibly than air, heavier than expectation. "Why me?" she whispered, almost too softly to be heard. A gentle wind twirled around her hair, lifting strands to brush against her cheek like a familiar hand. "Because you listened." The reply was not spoken, not heard in the ordinary sense. Sit was a truth that resonated through every fiber of her being. It carried the weight of years of preparation, of unseen guidance, of destiny intertwined with the very essence of the hidden city. The path ahead opened gradually before her, as though the city itself bent to recognize her presence. She approached a vast, circular plaza, the true center of the city, where the air seemed thick with accumulated power and memory. At its heart stood the heart itself, an enormous structure, half monument, half living element, ribbon of wind caught mid-flight. It was carved from crystal so translucent that light flowed through it like liquid, humming with deep, resonant magic. Streams of wind twisted gracefully around the tower, carrying soft murmurs from the city to the sky above, wrapping the plaza. In a gentle, perpetual dance, her feet trembled slightly as she neared it, though not from fear. It was awe, reverence, and recognition all at once. She felt the currents that had whispered to her since childhood flutter with relief and excitement, as if they had been waiting centuries for this moment. This was the place that had been calling to her in every wind, every echo, every forgotten memory. The winds spoke again, not as scattered voices, but as a single consciousness, brushing gently against her mind. "You were born with our voice inside you. You were meant to return to us." Her breath caught the memories that had always seemed disconnected, the faint breezes that seemed to carry words only she could understand, the strange resonance she felt in storms, the echoes of laughter and whispers, long gone suddenly coalesced into clarity. Everything made sense. Every mysterious whisper, every sleepless night spent listening, every unexplained intuition had been leading her here. She realized that the whispers were not strangers. They were her family. They were home. The heart pulsed, releasing a low, harmonious hum that vibrated through the ground, through the air, and into her very soul. Her wrist glowed brighter, the mark no longer a simple luminescence, but a radiant spiral of living wind that wrapped around her arm, coiled around her shoulders, embraced her chest. Patterns of light danced across her body, weaving into intricate designs as though the city itself was stitching its history, its power, its hope into her being. The city whispered in unison, "Wind listener, awaken." A soft current rose around her, lifting her slightly above the stone plaza. The light of the heart spread outward, cascading over every building, illuminating mosaics and murals, filling the city with a quiet dawn that seemed to rise from beneath rather than above. Threads of shimmering air flowed into her chest, threading into the core of her being. She gasped softly, feeling warmth and energy that was both gentle and infinite. For the first time, she understood the weight of her role. She felt the strength of centuries of listeners who had come before her, the cumulative wisdom of the city's magic and memory. Her heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the heart, the glow of her mark sinking with the light spiraling above and around her. Then she heard it, not a whisper this time, but a chorus, voices layered upon voices, harmonizing in perfect resonance. They were familiar, yet eternal, soft breezes from her childhood, fierce gales from the storms she had crossed, wandering winds from the forgotten forests, and the crystal-clear echoes from the valleys she had traversed. All of them converged in a single, radiant note that vibrated through her mind. "You are home, Emeli." Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of recognition, of belonging, of a life she had never truly known until this moment. The winds had not merely guided her to a city, they had guided her to herself. She finally understood that the long journey, the storms, the whispers, and the loneliness of her childhood had not been random. They had been preparation. She was meant to. Here, she was meant to respond. She was meant to become this. The light from her wrist faded gradually, leaving a faint, comforting glow. It was no longer a mark. It was a promise, a bond, a symbol of her connection to the city, to the winds, and to the legacy she now carried. Her feet touched the ground once more, and she felt transformed, calm, yet powerful, connected to something vast, yet personal. She carried the heartbeat of the city within her. The winds settled around her shoulders like a cloak, gentle, protective, and alive. Your journey is not over, the winds whispered softly. This is only the beginning. Emeli looked up at the heart, its crystal spirals shimmering with pride, and allowed herself, for the first time, a full smile, not hesitant, not uncertain, but radiant and open. "I'm ready," she whispered aloud, the words carrying a confidence she had never known before. The winds responded, curling warmly around her hand as if to hold it, to reassure her, to promise companionship and guidance. And in that moment, the city of whispering winds exhaled a sigh of recognition, of acceptance, and of trust in its new wind listener. Every floating lantern flickered gently, every crystal surface shimmered, every breeze that wound through the streets vibrated with welcoming energy. The city itself seemed to lean in, ready to reveal secrets, to teach, and to walk with her into the adventures that lay beyond its borders. As Emeli took her first steps away from the heart, she felt the world of magic stretch before her, full of possibilities. She could hear whispers of distant winds, soft hints of places that needed balance, gentle nudges guiding her toward mysteries not yet uncovered. She realized her role was not static. It was living, dynamic, and boundless. The responsibility was immense, but so was the joy. She had been chosen not because she was the strongest or the cleverest, but because she had listened, truly listened to the winds. And the winds had never lied. She wandered the streets of the city, marveling at details she had not noticed before. The crystalline bridges arching over streams of silver air, the faint music of the structures themselves, the way tiny motes of wind magic danced in patterns only she could see. She traced her fingers over the ancient stones, feeling pulses of memory and history. Every mural whispered stories of triumph and failure, of listeners who had shaped destinies and restored harmony. And now her story would join theirs. The wind carried her gaze upward, and she saw the outer walls of the city stretch toward hidden horizons, unseen realms where the magic of the world lingered. She understood, for the first time, that the city of whispering winds was both a sanctuary and a bridge to unseen worlds, to hidden truths, to the endless interplay between human life and the realm of elemental magic. Her heart swelled as she realized she had become part of something far greater than herself. And yet, in that realization, she also felt a serene quiet. She was home, but she was no longer just a child hearing whispers. She was the listener now, the bridge, the protector, and the guide. And somewhere, in the faintest ripple of silver mist, the city seemed to murmur its approval. Go forth, Emeli, listen, learn, restore, and never forget, you are never alone. The sun, or what she sensed as the city's own luminescence, cast long ribbons of light through the air. And for the first time in her life, Emeli walked, not uncertain, not hesitant, but fully in rhythm with the wind itself. The journey ahead was vast, full of challenges, discoveries, and new magic. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to simply stand in the plaza, feeling the pulse of the city beneath her feet, the harmony of the heart above her head, and the eternal whispering winds weaving through her very soul. She smiled again, softly, letting the joy of belonging and purpose wash over her, ready to meet whatever came next. The city had claimed her, and she had claimed her place within it. The first chapter of her new life as the wind listener had begun. The winds grow quiet now, their stories settling into stillness. Let the last whisper rest gently in your heart. The magic of this city remains with you, even as you leave. Carry its calm, its light, its breath, wherever you go. Until the winds call again, remember this peace. And now we close the journey of the whispering wind.